Hey guys, this market update. We know the game that we're playing, right? Let me explain it. You buy and hold the best assets. What happens in the short term is actually irrelevant. Let me show you the data. If you miss the 10 best days in 11 years, an entire decade of time, 10 days out of that, that's where the vast majority of your returns come from. 10 days in 10 years, 11 years. That's mental, right? If you miss those days, just the 10 best days, you make $573,000 versus $3 million. That is an entire life's worth of investment returns, gains. Your life is completely different with those two scenarios. 10 days out of 11 years. If you miss the best 50 days, you make nothing. Just understand the game. This is irrelevant. Doesn't matter. What's the price now and this and that? Does not matter. Play the game. I showed you the data before that 90% of active fund managers underperform the index. 90%. Know the game. Know the game that we're in. Bitcoin over the last 4 years has had a compound annual growth rate of 30%, outperforming the S&P and the NASDAQ. Know the game that you're in. We're at 63,000 in a bear market. It's an unbelievable success. Last bear market was 15K. We're just moving up and up. It doesn't matter. The best day, by the way, is when the price goes down, because we're accumulating this asset, right? We're still young. We're not going to retire now. When you retire, you can then sell it. Not now. We're still playing the game. We're still accumulating. The best days is when it goes down, because the price gets cheaper in relation to the trend. Don't miss the best days. The game here is to hodl. Get in, stay in, wait, let all of the nonsense play out. It doesn't matter. Don't get distracted. If you want to buy and hold Bitcoin, do it on Bybit. They'll give you a deposit bonus if you're a new user. So click the link below. You can buy Bitcoin on there. They'll give you a deposit bonus when you sign up to $30,000. We also have another FUD storm from MSCI trying to kick Strategy and a couple of other Bitcoin treasury companies out of the market. This is kind of bizarre because MSCI they obviously have like this kind of personal vendetta against Bitcoin. They don't like it. It's the same as Vanguard. Vanguard said, we'll never offer Bitcoin. The CEO ended up getting sacked on that one. And then obviously they're going to start to offer it. Look, everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. And this is actually us winning, because this is what happens with new technologies, right? They burst into places, and there is a section of society that just hates everything, right? And just is anti everything. So when something comes in and it becomes popular and people want it, you just get a section of society that just despises it for no other reason. They just want to be anti. So this is actually us winning, because we're just forcing our way into these things. And actually, if you look at MSCI, they don't want these treasury companies in, and they've made this screen to basically boot out just 3 companies from their indexes, which is totally bizarre, right? Now, how can you ever buy an MSCI index again when the index company is making arbitrary decisions about what they include in indexes? The whole point of an index is that it's non-arbitrary. You just have a set of rules and that's that. And they're changing the rules to boot out 3 companies. So I don't buy MSCI indexes anyway. I think they're loser indexes. But look at the CEO of MSCI, and you come down here and it says, he is a member of the Net Zero Principles group. So he's woke. And if you go woke, you go broke. We all know that. And so this is actually us winning. It's the same as Vanguard when the CEO said, we'll never touch Bitcoin, and then he got sacked. We are winning here. I wouldn't worry about this. Is it bad news? It doesn't matter. Again, buy the best assets, hold them. That's it. You're going to have some volatility in the meantime, and it just doesn't matter. We also had a lot of inflation data this week and government spending data. Considering the amount of deficit spending, inflation being like 2 to 4% is actually pretty insane. Like, how is it not at 10, 15, 20? But look, producer prices are up. They're up 4.2% per year over the last 5 years. 2% inflation is a myth. Well, they don't target producer price index inflation. It's more core PCE. But in any case, the cumulative effect of inflation, everyone knows this, 4.2% per year. Well, if you're in any of the investable asset classes, you've outperformed that anyway. You can't save in dollars. But look, in the month of July, the US government collected $334 billion, but they spent $766 billion. The deficit is almost 1/2 of a Bitcoin network, 1/3 of a Bitcoin network. This is 1 month. You can't annualize this. It's obviously a bad month, but there's nothing to cut here. Medicare, Social Security, net interest, national defense, health, none of that is going to be cut. None of it. There is no way to sort this out. Absolutely none. You just can't. The only way is to get this net interest down by the Fed printing money and cancelling or just buying that debt. And that's it. I bet then you increase the units permanently in the system. And the only way to counteract that is for companies to produce goods and services for less energy acting as a counterweight for consumer goods. There's just no other way to get around this. That's how the system is designed. How are you going to stop spending? The thing is, if you stop spending, then that stimulus gets removed, which means you get deflationary forces in the economy, which make this even worse, actually. And that's the thing. There's just no way out. The only way out here is to print the money and hope that robots make things for cheaper as a force against that inflation in the currency. It's the only way. The Fed, of course, doesn't have credibility because they're the ones that make sure inflation is positive. So 65 consecutive months above 2%. Well, it has to be above 2%. The debt is so large, the only way is to debase it. In any case, the government is just spending way more than they take in. But of course they will. That's how it works. It's a debt-based system. The money doesn't actually exist. It's not like the government takes in money that's created in the economy. I know commercial banks create the money and the currency, but ultimately, all of these companies are supposed to deflate their products. So the money, there's just not enough currency. Where does the currency come from? Eventually, it comes from the central bank. That's why they exist, right? And so eventually, these cycles happen where the central bank has to create the money, and that inflates the price of everything. And that's why you can't be in fiat currency. And look, the debt, I have some sympathy here. The debt was actually coming down a little bit, and now it's just absolutely blown out. Now, there was obviously a war that they had to pay for, which adds to it. But you have the tariff refunds, US federal government outlays. So the interest is now higher than the defense spending. How do you stop the interest going higher? Well, you have to cut rates, right? That's the only way to get the interest down, is to cut the rate you pay. But of course, that creates inflation as well. It's an unwinnable situation. So we're going to muddle through where real inflation is 10%, and somehow all of these agencies are going to try and tell us that it's 2%, but it's not really 2%. So this is it. This is the system we're in. Net interest is the third biggest outlay. Look, the American data is just readily available. If you look at UK, Europe, all of this, it's exactly the same. There's just not enough production of goods and services to deflate money printing that has to happen. Interest expense is insane, right? In any case, the tariff refunds are kind of a microcosm of just how society behaves. They tried to take in more tax. They tried to do that to get the deficit down, right? And what happened was everyone sued them, and then the Supreme Court said, yep, we're going to side with you. And so the S&P is at an all-time high because all of these companies raise their prices expecting to pay tax, and then they're just getting tax refunds on that. So they raise their prices and they're just keeping all the money. So the S&P is at an all-time high, which is, look, quite good because it's a stimulus to markets, right? But the debt's just expanding ever more. So you can't cut the deficit because we want it. Every single part of the economy, including companies who are going to sue, including everyone that wants free healthcare, free, nothing is free, it's getting paid for by this net interest, Social Security, everything else. No one wants their money taken away. And so this is just how it is. The currency gets debased. And so you know for a fact you have to be in strong assets. It's the only way. So you have to save in those assets, and you have to get out of this system where we're all actually trying to debase the currency, aren't we? Right? From our behaviors. We want free stuff. We vote for people that say we're going to get free food stamps, healthcare, education, everything else, right? So it's going to keep growing. It can't even go down. The only way is to print the money against it and just hope that the robots start making things for much cheaper so we can get some lower cost consumer goods to see us through this massive inflation that we're going to get in assets. Every part of society wants free stuff, including the companies which don't want to pay tax, people that don't want to pay for their healthcare or education or anything else. This is how we behave. Inflation is set in stone because we want it. Different groups battle for it to who can get the most free stuff and put the most inflation on other people. In any case, asset owners always do well. That's why they're called wealthy, right? So we just have to get into any of this stuff, right? And save over time, be consistent, be humble, do our 10 to 15 years because of the inevitable, right? Which is inflation in the currency. Look, 3% budget deficit, they're just voting to increase the debt, right? And of course, if the US just said, we're not doing this anymore, we're not going to spend a deficit, right? Then worldwide prices would crash 50, 80%, massive financial crash, right? So do you want that? Or do you want just kind of the slow movement of asset prices going higher with some volatility over time, right? And that's it. So it gives you a chance to get out into assets over time. And again, be humble, do your 10 to 15 years in the best assets. If you do trade Bitcoin, crypto, trade for assets, everything, you can trade them on Bybit. Link in the description to a $30,000 deposit bonus if you're a new user. I'm James, this is MyZG. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.